Thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar, How to Create a Mobile-Friendly Customer Journey. I'm Linda West, Group Manager of Demand Generation at Acton Software, and I'm joined today by Blair Sims, Director of Content Marketing for DialogTech. Welcome, Blair.
Thanks, Linda. Before we get started, I wanted to at least give the audience a quick introduction about DialogTech, if you're not familiar with us. We are the combination of two companies, If by Phone and Mongoose Metrics, and we are the leader in call analytics and automation software for marketers. What that means is that we have a software platform that works before, during, and after the call with tools like call tracking, call scoring, and call routing that help marketers optimize conversions and calls and sales from every marketing channel.
Thanks, Blair. And just a bit about Acton as well. We are a marketing automation provider, actually ranked as a leader by Forrester Research. And if you want to download the recent WAVE report comparing different marketing automation vendors, please do so at acton.com/wave. And let's jump right into the content here. So first, we want to start by taking a look at the marketer's new task. There's so much buzz around mobile these days. It's really easy to get carried away with a single mobile or single multi-screen initiative like building a mobile app or implementing a mobile coupon program or QR codes if it's 2001. But I think often it's more important just to take a step before investing in those types of programs and looking at what will have the most impact on mobile users. And often it's as simple as updating your web assets and your web properties to responsive design. So I want to start by looking at responsive design, giving you some tips on getting started with a responsive design project and moving over to responsive design. Because the reality is you should always remember that your campaign is digital. People will interact with it from a variety of devices, and you have to consider what the experience will be for users that interact with your campaigns on a mobile phone, on a tablet, on a desktop, because whether it's a social campaign or a digital ad campaign, you need to plan out and test the experience for users on mobile, on tablet, on desktop. And last but not least on this slide, it's best practice to use responsive design for your web pages and for your emails. It's an easy win for most marketers tackling mobile. And so I want to start by giving you some more detail around the type of lift that you can get if you implement responsive design. So I'll start by showing you a case study from one of my programs at Acton. It's a little mini case study just to demonstrate the type of lift that you can get when you take this multi-screen approach. So we, of course, use our own products. So we rely really heavily on email, on lead nurturing, to qualify incoming leads and to increase brand engagement. And you can see up on screen one of the emails and its corresponding landing pages from a top-of-funnel lead nurturing program. This is the desktop view, which is quite clean, it's clear, it's pretty readable. But if you look at the mobile view, the experience that the mobile user gets with this campaign is pretty terrible. It's not readable. The user has to, zoom in and scroll back and forth, even to read the message. So our goal was to completely revamp this program with mobile in mind, with multiple screens in mind. And this is what we came up with. So first and foremost, we made the emails and the landing page responsive. So we use CSS media queries to move things around on the page, to tell it what to do on a mobile screen. And so the design flowed nicely regardless of device size. So this is the desktop view that you're seeing on screen now, and I'll show you the mobile view in a second. But we also made sure that all of our videos were mobile friendly and would load in those native standard players on iPhone and on Android phones. And then in terms of the design, we relied more heavily on vertical scrolling. We used much larger text. And we made sure that all the buttons and the icons were very thumb-friendly. They're larger, they're easy to click. So this is what it looks like on mobile. As you can see, the experience is much better. The mobile view is just as easy to read and interact with as the desktop version. It doesn't create any barriers for the mobile user that don't already exist for the desktop user. So it's all equal now, right? So our hope was that this experience would increase engagement from our mobile email users and give us that lift in overall campaign results. So if you remember that stat from Litmus that they published, I think every year they publish a stat, over 50% of emails are opened on mobile phones. So it's really important to get it right on mobile. And we wanted to gain those users back. Instead of giving them that horrible experience, we wanted to make sure that they had a great experience with our campaign. The results are in, right? What happened? Well, engagement in the program nearly doubled. We saw a 93.5% increase in sales-ready leads generated from this program. We did a head-to-head test against the desktop-only versions and the responsive versions, and for us, the results were very clear. We doubled our lead generation, which when you think about it makes sense. If 50% of users are opening emails on a mobile phone, we were gaining that half back in our campaign and making sure that they were fully engaged in the program. So given the incredible results that you can get with responsive design, you would really think that everyone's doing it, but actually not so much. According to a study published by eMarketer and conducted by Lionbridge last summer, only 42% of marketers are using responsive design in their emails. That means nearly 60% of marketers are not taking advantage of that lift that you can get from implementing responsive design in email. And the story is similar with landing pages and websites. So the chart you see on screen now is from a benchmark report released by Urban Airship and published by eMarketer. The second bar on this chart, which is highlighted on screen in orange, shows that only 23% of marketers use responsive design consistently and consider it essential. An additional 25% use responsive design often, which is good. So that means about 48% of marketers are using it all the time or some of the time. But that still leaves over half of marketers, 52% of marketers, who are not using responsive design or who rarely use it. So if you're one of those marketers or a designer who decides to use it in your campaigns, you're really carving out a considerable advantage for yourself over your competition. They probably aren't using it yet. It's a great potential for you to get that leg up in your campaign. You can really run ahead of the curve here and get that lift while your competitors are still kind of sleeping on it. Further to that, Google has stated in no uncertain terms that responsive design is absolutely preferred. This is a quote from Google. Google recommends that webmasters follow the industry best practice of using responsive web design, namely serving the same HTML for all devices and using only CSS media queries to decide the rendering on each device. Google, in their recent update now is even avoiding responsive sites. So it helps with your SEO. So it's absolutely across the board, one of the best things that you can do if you're concerned with mobile. So I hope by now, if you weren't already convinced of the importance and just general awesomeness of responsive design, that now you are fully convinced. So now I want to give you a couple of must-haves for implementing responsive design if you are tackling a responsive project. These are some of the things that I've learned over time and kind of want to share with you so you can avoid some pitfalls and really prioritize what you need if you're diving in headfirst with responsive design to really think about the mobile experience. So first off, it's really important to establish your goals for your website or your landing page. Make sure those are really clearly defined and communicated to all team members, including copywriters, UX architects, designers, developers, everybody. This may seem totally obvious, but it's really easy to leave out team members who traditionally have not needed to know about your marketing goals in any detail. Responsive design, though, is a highly collaborative process, and each team member, even those developers, need context in order to deliver results. Achieving your goals will require this really intelligent mashup of smart copy, very compelling design, and efficient technical delivery. So to start, just make sure that you're defining your goals and communicating them out to the team. So these are a couple of things you should be looking at. First, your typical visitor profile, or your buyer personas, as marketers like to call it. Who is visiting your site? Clearly define that. Key visitor motives. Why are they visiting your site? What has driven them to visit your site? Is it a pain point? Are they researching something? Have they been driven from a referral channel? Why are people visiting your site? What are their motives? And next, key concepts that need to be communicated, or what do you want them to know? Based on their motives, based on who they are, what do you want them to know about your product or about your organization? And then last but not least, define primary and secondary calls to action for each major page or each section of your site, which is what you ultimately want them to do. What action do you want them to take? And these are all really important things to define very closely and communicate to everyone so that they can translate their piece of the pie, so that the developer can make sure that the primary CTA is placed correctly on the page. And so even people who haven't traditionally needed to know these things now need to be looped into this conversation. And with responsive design, content can be moved, it can be resized, it can appear or disappear as you move through different screen sizes. And variations in that content configuration can very drastically change the tone of your message, the perception of your brands, even response rates on your form. So creating a content hierarchy to establish which pieces of content are most crucial so that those primary calls to action and that key content is always at the top is really, really important. This will be invaluable to you as you move into design and development phases. If your team knows what is priority, those skilled designers and developers on your team will help you make sure the ideal content is always at the center of attention, and they'll give you that ideal content configuration if they know your goals and priorities. So if you know going into the web copywriting phase and the design phase that your website will be responsive, you can do a lot up front to make it easier to create a really awesome experience on mobile. You can avoid unnecessary battles. If copywriters and designers know at every phase what content is tier 1 and what content is tier 5, there's less of a chance of having to rework or redesign stuff or recode stuff because someone earlier in the process is disappointed with the end result on smaller screen sizes. That copywriter flips their phone open and they're like, that key sentence or that key call to action that I wrote is at the bottom of the page on a mobile phone. If your designers and your developers know this, you're going to avoid a lot of battles in the development process. And again, your content hierarchy can be really simple. Try starting with just 3 tiers. Tag everything you write before it goes into the production pipeline as tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. Something that simple can really help maintain your priorities throughout that development process. And designers and developers don't always know this inherently. So make sure that that's really clearly defined. So on to our next must-have, distill your content. It's really important to prioritize, but it's just as important to distill it down to a format that's very compact, so that you can really quickly communicate your ideas. This is essential on mobile. Users are looking for quick loading functionality. They want to know what to expect before they scroll down, especially on their mobile phone. And not all content is created equal, so make sure you prioritize and do not be afraid to cut the fluff. If you're a marketer, you're probably a maverick at fashioning really lengthy value propositions or really boring product specs into very sharp, pithy little digestible chunks of content. So use those skills. That's really important in the mobile world. And make sure that those important concepts are fashioned into bite-sized, very space-efficient blurbs, so that those things will flow very easily and naturally into a modular responsive design. And also find really creative ways to communicate complex concepts to your users. Instead of using giant blocks of text, which used to be acceptable, but now is really boring for users, consider using video. Try an infographic. Try interactive features to give form and shape and function to those complex ideas. And also don't hesitate to involve your design and development teams when you're ideating. Leverage their expertise to really inform the type of marketing content that you create. And then last but not least on the screen, try vertical chunking. You've probably seen this a lot recently, and there's a good reason for it. I'll show you what that looks like. Here's an example from the Act-On website where we're using vertical chunking on a product page. What we've done is we've taken this page that used to be just a wall of text with a couple of images and isolated the main concepts into clear vertical chunks. Each idea or each product feature on the page has been packaged up into a short title, a little description, and an image. So flawless email flash, email nurturing, A/B testing. There are all these distinct sections and distinct concepts that the user can see. It's almost like a slide presentation on a web page. And this is really great when you look at it in a mobile view. This is how it translates into that mobile view. It's great when you're scrolling on a phone because you can see very quickly and easily what the concept is. If you're interested, you read more. If not, you swipe. And it translates really well on a mobile phone. It translates across all device types, which is why this method has become so popular. And responsive design, as I've said before, and I will say it again, is a highly collaborative process. Those lines between content and design and technology have become increasingly blurred. So the traditional linear development process is really fast becoming passé. Most marketers think of site development in a couple of phases, very linear phases. First, you develop your copy. Then you develop your content or your design and your wireframes. Then you go to full design, and then you just code that design. And it's very linear. And while this is still mostly true, these disciplines are now much more interdependent, which means a more cyclical approach is needed with responsive design. A responsive website may need to go through several cycles of collaborative refinement before you really achieve that optimal result, that optimal configuration, and that mashup between those disciplines. So work with your team or agency to set up regular cross-disciplinary meetings between all those phases, the stakeholders in those phases. Most good website development companies now are cross-training key team members to enrich these types of interactions. Graphic designers might be cross-trained in HTML and CSS, or a developer might also be cross-trained in interface design or something along those lines. And that's all because this is a very cyclical process, and it requires the team members to really understand what's before and after them and understand how what they're doing is impacting those things. You won't necessarily have a complete design frame before you start development. That's true for a lot of responsive design projects. Many teams are choosing to create, basic styles and basic frames, and then allowing the design to evolve organically in the browser. It's really important to prepare to refine your contributions based on input from other team members. Do not be inflexible in a responsive design project. If the copy of one of your pages or your ad campaigns, and you need a landing page, and the copy does not fit in the design system that fits 100 other pages on your site, just consider tweaking the design. Consider tweaking the copy, not reworking the entire design of the site. Or if you're on the design side, if that design causes 3 times as much development work to get it to but on mobile, and there's an alternate solution that looks just as good, then just change the design. Responsive design projects have to be collaborative. and everybody has to be flexible because there are so many variables that need to come together to make a website that looks good across all devices. So set those expectations early with your team and really be prepared to find solutions that are compromises and make everyone on the team happy. So with that, what I'm going to do is pass it over to Blair to take a look at some stats and also how DialogTech helps in the mobile world.
All right, thanks, Linda. I wanted to begin by presenting the idea that marketing is going mobile. So no matter what channel of marketing you use to generate visits to your website, to generate leads, conversions, and revenue, that channel is moving rapidly towards mobile, towards smartphones and tablets. As you can see from this slide, digital media has already gone mobile. 60% of all internet consumption, whether that's browsing on websites, watching videos online, looking at emails, or engaging with social media, running searches, whatever online channels we're talking about, 60% of that time is spent on smartphones and on mobile devices, compared to just 40% now, which is spent on desktops, and that disparity is only getting larger. And in this slide, we drill down into specific digital marketing channels to show you how they are also going mobile. Google recently announced that 50% of all searches are on mobile devices. So whether the result is paid search, organic search, SEO, 50% of those searches are now taking place on a smartphone or tablet. And 40% of those clicks are happening on mobile devices. And that number is growing. By midsummer 2015, it's estimated that that number will reach 50% and exceed 50%. So not only are people running more searches, that more of the clicks, the visits to your website from paid search and SEO are taking place on mobile devices. Social media, 71% of social media is accessed on a mobile device. But what's even more interesting is that 78% of Facebook users now are mobile only. So there's also a growing population of people who are not only prefer smartphones and mobile devices, but that's the only way in which they're going to engage with your online marketing and visit your website. So 78% of Facebook users right now are mobile only. If you do email marketing, 66% of emails are now opened on mobile devices. It's a huge number. So when you're doing marketing, you need to be aware of the huge impact that mobile is having on how people are interacting with, consuming, and converting from your mobile campaigns. 40% of online retail sales are now on mobile devices. 50% of clicks from display advertising is on mobile. The stats go on and on and on, and they're only getting larger. There's a huge amount of evidence that shows that that marketing channels have all gone mobile. Now, in a mobile world, one of the things marketers need to realize is that phone calls, are the new clicks. When the internet became popular and we all started doing digital marketing, we focused primarily on generating clicks, online conversions from all of our marketing. But in a mobile world, that's flipped back to the idea that people are actually making phone calls from the marketing, and those are the types of conversions that marketers need to be aware of and need to be generating. Here's one statistic specifically for search marketing, but the more mobile searches there's a direct corollary to the more inbound calls businesses are receiving. So this study shows that 38 billion calls to U.S. businesses occurred from mobile searches last year in 2014. That's a big number, but that number is almost going to double by 2018 to 73 billion. So as more people run searches on their smartphones and mobile devices, the end result is a massive number of inbound calls to businesses. So part of the reason why that is click-to-call. You're probably familiar with click-to-call, but if you're not, it's the idea that you can tap on a phone number on your smartphone or a call button or icon on your smartphone and trigger an immediate call to that phone number, to that business. You can see from this comparison that if someone is running a search or looking at your website on their smartphone, there's an immediacy to that. People use their smartphone. Smartphones have conditioned us to expect immediate access to information and answers to questions. That's why we grab our smartphone, to get immediate information. People aren't necessarily willing to wait an hour or a day or a week after they fill out a web form to be contacted by a business. They want answers to their specific questions right away. So they call. I mean, compare the experience of just one tap of your thumb on the call button to speak to somebody, or having to fill out with your thumbs on a small screen a lengthy web form to request a callback. Obviously, the one on the left is easier and more natural for people, since a smartphone is, after all, still a phone, and calls are the natural conversion path. So that's part of the reason why calls are becoming so popular in mobile marketing. Some more stats to back that up. You can see that up to 53% of mobile shoppers call a business, which is really an amazing stat. We think of e-commerce and the idea that people do all of their shopping online. They do the research online. They buy online. They don't need to call people to connect to a human being. But that's not the case. People want to call you when they have questions while they're shopping on mobile devices. It's just easier to do, even if they complete the purchase either on their desktop or on their smartphone. If they have questions during the research phase, they still want to be able to call and talk to somebody. You can see from the stat that 55% of people find having a phone number in mobile extremely important. And more calls is actually great news for marketers. There's a wealth of stats that show how important and how valuable call conversions are to sales. 66% of sales managers rate phone leads as good or excellent, better than any other lead type. An inbound call is the lead salespeople value most. And the reason why is because those calls often convert to revenue. Some studies show that phone calls can convert to revenue 10 times more than web clicks. And once you think about it, it seems obvious. Someone who's calling you has an immediate interest in speaking to somebody in sales right away, while someone who fills out a form on your website might just be kicking the tires and might just be downloading a piece of content you have and not necessarily are ready to engage and begin the sales process with your company. But someone who calls usually is. And that's why in the U.S., people are spending $68 billion a year just on ads to drive calls. So as marketers, what should we do to help optimize the mobile journey for calls? Well, the first thing to do, of course, is to include a prominent phone number on every page of your website, whether it's your landing pages from different channels like search or display or social, or just on your regular web pages on your site or your e-commerce pages. Give people the ability to call you from their smartphones whenever they have a question or want to engage. You can see from the stats to the left that people find it extremely important to be able to call businesses during each phase of the decision-making process. So the stat obviously that stands out is that when people are ready to make a purchase, a high percentage of people want to be able to call a business during that time. But even if they're just beginning the purchasing process on the customer journey, whether it's the inspiration stage or the research stage, they still want to be able to call you. So you should include a phone number on every page of your website to make it easier for them to do that. As you can see from the stat on the bottom right, 47% of people said they would explore other brands. They would actually turn away from a company and look at a competitor if they weren't able to find a phone number quickly to be able to call them. So it's very important to be able to give people the option of calling you. Think about if someone's running a search for your services and on their smartphone, and they visit your landing page and there's no phone number. They might decide to click the backspace and go back to the search and actually go visit a competitor site instead and call them. So obviously having web forms is important, but having that phone number on every page to capture call conversions is extremely important. Phone numbers are also important in email marketing. So if you think about how we use email to generate visits to our site or to nurture leads that aren't really sales ready yet until they're ready to engage in the sales process, including a phone number in your emails, a clickable phone number they can call from their smartphones, is also very important. So the example on the right of this email is one that we send out. We use content marketing to help nurture leads that aren't ready to engage with a sales agent, nurture them through the marketing funnel until they're a valuable prospect and one that's ready to speak to sales. But we don't always know when that switch occurs. So being able to, people might get this email and already be ready to engage with us. And you want to be able to give them that phone number in the email they can click on, since they're most likely looking at this email on their smartphone, in order to make it easier for them to call you and become that qualified lead, that qualified opportunity. If you're doing e-commerce or mobile commerce, it's also important to include a phone number during the checkout stage to remove distractions from checkout funnels. So you can see two different versions of mobile optimized checkout sites. On the left is a stripped down version from Dillard's, which takes away all the distractions that you would see on the GNC side. So GNC has, for example, they kept their nav, they kept their social media links, they've got other promos and options in there. And if you have a mobile optimized checkout process, you should test which one of these works best for you. But when you do that, be sure to include a phone number prominently on your checkout form. So if somebody has a question, they can call you as opposed to just abandoning that shopping cart. You can see both sites do that very well. They have prominent click-to-call links on their checkout funnel. So when you're talking about, because calls are so popular in mobile marketing, it's really important that marketers are able to track and optimize calls in order to optimize their ROI, their return on investment from their different marketing channels. I know we do a great job, most companies do, of tracking web activity on their sites, of knowing when someone converts, where that visit came from, how to attribute that visit to the specific channel, whether it's search or social media or email, that helps generate that conversion. But what if somebody picks up the phone and calls you? As you can see here, if someone calls you from your landing page or your website, are you able to attribute that call back to the specific channel that generated it, whether it's SEO or paid search, social media or email, or even an offline campaign like direct mail or TV? I know that when I watch TV, I'm constantly on my smartphone running searches. Are you able to attribute the conversion, the call conversion, back to the actual channel that generated it? It's very important in order to understand what marketing is working and what marketing is not, in order to optimize results. So here's an example from search. At the top, you can see somebody is running a search. This is an automotive example. They see there's a paid search example there at the top, but also an SEO and organic search example below. If someone clicks on one of those links and visits the site, they then find the dealership closest to them, and they make a call, and that call goes on to that dealership. Now, as a marketer, if this is your paid search for your SEO program, do you have any kind of understanding at all right now of what generated that call? You don't. You don't know. You may know that the call came in, but you don't know. You can't tie the actual caller to the call, to the channel that generated the call, to search. You don't know what keyword search they used before they visited your site. You don't know that they called a specific dealership from that keyword search. And you don't really know if that person goes on to actually book an appointment with the dealership or become a customer. You can't tie that back to your marketing channel to get credit for it. You also can't use that call data in some of the platforms you might use for search. For example, Kensho, Acquisio, Marin, or DoubleClick are all bid management platforms people use. You can't tie that call data in there the way you could a click in an online conversion help optimize for the keywords that are generating the most conversions and sales. You also can't use that data in Google AdWords or Google Analytics to include that data with your online component. You can't use it in Adobe Marketing Cloud or Salesforce or whatever it is that you're using to help with paid search. If that call data can't be included in there, you can't use it to optimize the results in campaigns. So how do you do it? How do you attribute calls back to the marketing source that generated it in order to understand and optimize campaign performance? Well, one way to do that is through call attribution software. It works for any marketing channel, whether it's SEO or web calls from your website or paid search, social media, display, whatever kind of marketing you're doing. When someone calls you from it, either directly from the ad or by visiting your website, you can tell exactly what drove that call, and that specific caller, so that you can optimize your marketing to generate more of the quality callers that are becoming sales. So here's that same example I showed you a slide ago, but this time if they're using call attribution software. You can see now that as a marketer, you have visibility into specifically who this person is who called. You can see the keyword search they used to generate the call. You can see the web pages, the mobile pages specifically they visited before they called. You can see which dealership in this example they called. And you even have, as we'll talk about later, insight into the actual conversation that takes place from this piece of marketing. So if it's paid search, for example, you then know the search. You can then optimize your paid search programs for the keywords, the search engines, the keywords, and even the landing pages that are generating callers. And then that call data can then be used in all the platforms we talked about in order to help you optimize their performance and optimize not just web leads, but calls and sales from your marketing channel. So very quickly, how call attribution works is it assigns unique phone numbers to the visitors of your website based on where they came from. So in the example above, the first example, a searcher comes from a search engine through a certain keyword, and they visit your site, and you can see they're presented with a dynamic phone number that automatically displays. And if they call that number, you can tie that call back to the specific person and keyword search and search engine that generated the call. Now, example 2 can come from a different search engine or can just be using a different search, but you can see they get a different phone number. So when they call that number, you can then attribute that caller uniquely from the channel that generated it. And it's a great way for marketers to be able to prove and understand what marketing is working and driving calls, and then optimize performance to generate more. And it works for calls from any source. I mean, we touched on this already, but paid search on the left, you can see there's call. That's what you see is an example of a call extension, that call button. If someone calls that, you can still track that call and that caller back to that specific source, back to that specific ad. If someone calls below on the organic call listing, you can track that as well. We already talked about email. If someone calls from email, you can track that to the specific email that generated the call. So when you're trying to optimize your email messaging and nurturing programs for what's working and what's not, you can include call conversion numbers in there as well. And of course, there's the website on the right. When someone calls from your website, you're able to understand exactly where they came from, what pages they viewed, where they're calling from, their caller location, who the caller is, the phone number. All of that information is tied to that caller and passed on and captured so that you can use it to optimize your website and your marketing for what's working and what's not. As marketers, we're all about A/B testing, especially in digital marketing, and that's very true for mobile. So when you're running mobile optimization tests to see which design or content on your website or your emails or your advertising works best, be sure to include call data as part of that test. because people are so likely to call you and convert by calling from your mobile marketing, it's very important to be able to include call data in your A/B test. You can really accurately decide and pick the version that's driving the most conversions and sales. So here's a simple example from a marketing optimization agency called WIDERFUNNEL that shows really simple A/B tests. On the left, you can see all they really did was change the color of the buttons in the middle. And basically, a simple change like this, you might not think would have any difference at all. But in fact, the version on the right generated 130% more phone calls just by changing the button. So 130% more phone calls, and those phone callers were valued as purchase ready. They converted to revenue more often than people who would have otherwise just clicked on and visited the website. So, being able to use call conversion data in your A/B tests for mobile is extremely important. And as I said before, being able to pass that call data to the other applications you use is also vital. I've already touched on many of these, but a marketing automation solution like Acton, for example, it's extremely important to be able to not just see the great web data and online data and email data that platform shows, but also the call data. And DialogTech, my company, integrates seamlessly with Acton to help give you that data together. It's amazing what you can see when you have calls and web data together in one place, and the insights that marketers can get, especially when it comes to optimizing for mobile. Now, even though I've talked about how important calls are and the high value of calls, not every call that comes in is a high quality sales lead. In fact, some data shows that up to 80% of inbound calls are not sales calls. They're people who are calling for other information, or they're calling for really basic information like directions to your store or office, hours or whatever it is, or they're current customers calling about their account, or they're looking for support, or maybe they're just solicitors or accidental calls. Whatever it is, not every call that comes in is going to be a high quality sales call, and you don't necessarily want to just open the funnels, the floodgates, and send every caller directly to a sales agent. You may want to do some qualification first, and there are tools that you can use to help automate that process as a marketer. So one of those tools is IVR, interactive voice response. And most people who've called a big company are familiar with IVR, whether it's the credit card company or an airline or a bank. It's that automated voice that basically helps funnel you and send you into the right place so you can get help the fastest. So, for example, if you call a company and they say press 1 to speak to sales, press 2 for support, press 3 to speak to HR, whatever it is. It's a way to help filter out the sales calls from the non-sales calls, so marketing can be sending more sales-ready calls to their sales agent. So you can do this by simply directing calls from your marketing to an IVR. You can configure it any way you want, and they can be the questions can be as qualified as they need to be or as simple as they need to be. But it's a great way to help send more people with purchasing intent to sales and filter out the non-sales related calls from interfering with your sales agent. You can also set up rules in order to route calls differently based on a wide variety of criteria. So for mobile specifically, because people are calling you from a smartphone, you can tell where they're calling using cell phone triangulation technology. And you can route that call differently based on the physical location of the person. So if you're running local search campaigns and you have a variety of stores throughout the country or throughout the city where the person's located, you can route that call directly to the closest store, the closest office, the closest agent to that caller. Or you can have it set up to route calls automatically based on marketing source. So if someone searches for a certain keyword inquiry, you may want to route that call differently than a different inquiry. Or if someone's calling from paid search versus a television ad, you may want to route that differently. It's up to you. But there are options you have that can automatically route the call based on the rules that you set up. Time of day of call. You may want to route people during business hours to a certain area, and people who are calling off hours to a different area. Or routing people based on sales agent performance. You may want to send more of your calls to the better performing agents. You can do a wide variety of call routing things in order to, especially for mobile marketing, where people are expecting that more of a personalized one-to-one interaction. There are ways you can treat each person based on the specific data surrounding the caller. Now, marketers, one of the issues marketers often face is they don't have a way to decide or to gauge the value of the calls that they're generating. So, we spend a great deal of money and put a great deal of time and effort into marketing campaigns that generate conversions, generate calls, but we don't necessarily know if those calls are good calls or bad calls. Especially if you're a marketing agency, you're sending calls to a client, you don't necessarily have any kind of visibility into what happens on the call. But there is technology that can help. The example here shows a conversation between a caller and a sales agent, but you can use technology like from DialogTech that will capture that conversation, transcribe it, associate it to the specific marketing campaign that generated it, and then enable you to run searches, keyword searches through the conversation for the terms that you think are most important that indicate a quality call. So for example, perhaps you want to ask if the sales agent asks someone if they want to have a quick demo, or if the person who is calling says, I want to buy now. Whatever the phrase is that you think is important to you, you can run searches through all the calls you're generating and pinpoint exactly which calls those words were spoken out loud, and then it can help you show how many quality calls you've generated from that particular search. It's an amazing piece of technology. That's a new way for marketers to gain visibility into the outcome of the calls that they're generating from their marketing. So I wanted to conclude with a quick case study from a customer of DialogTech called VERSATUBE, and basically they used our technology to help track and optimize conversions from paid search and from email. So they wanted to be able to show, they wanted to be able to generate more conversions and more online revenue, but they wanted to be able to capture that call component as well. Since most of the time someone becomes a customer, they do it through calling, and they use DialogTech to help them do that. So as I said, first they integrated their paid search campaigns and their email campaigns with DialogTech to be able to track the keyword level call data. So they understand for their paid search campaigns which keyword searches were generating either calls from either call extensions or visits to the website, which were resulting in calls, so they can help optimize their campaigns for what's actually generating calls and conversions. But they're also tying that data in to Google Analytics, as you can see on the right, so they can see that call data directly with the web data to help understand the impact that calls are having, as well as the web activity, so they can make intelligent decisions on what's working and what's not. Now, when calls came in, they sent the caller initially to a simple IVR that asked the caller to press 1 in order to speak to sales. When someone does that and shows intent that they're a sales lead, they were then routed differently based on time of day. So if the call came in the morning or early afternoon, that call was automatically routed to the VERSATUBE sales agents on the East Coast, and it was sent directly to every sales agent's mobile phone at once. I mentioned earlier about the different options for call routing. This is one of those options. You can route based on time of day to send to every sales agent's mobile phone at once, and the first person that answered the call took the call and took the lead. If the call came in later on in the day or in the evening, that call was then routed to the East Coast where there were agents who were still working. And again, the same scenario happened. All of the calls hit the mobile phones of every sales agent at once. First person who answers gets the call. And this company also used DialogTech technology to record the calls and then also generate reports for which agents were receiving the most calls, how long the average duration was of each call. We think of, for calls, the longer the call is with a sales agent, it usually means it's a better call. So call durations are usually a good indicator of call quality, and they were using reports to show which agents were having the longer phone calls. And they were actually recording the calls, as I said, so if they wanted to drill in and listen to actual phone conversations, the marketers were able to do that in order to help them understand which marketing was generating the better and more quality phone calls. And at the end of the day, VERSATUBE was able to use DialogTech to help them increase phone leads by 208% from Google paid search and email. But not just that, also increase revenue by 89% because of the great way they were routing calls right away to agents who were able to take that call and close that sale. So it's a great use case as a marketer for you to prove and improve the value of the marketing you're doing from every channel. So thanks a lot for listening to the presentation. If you're interested in a demo of DialogTech or to talk to one of our sales agents, please give us a call or visit our website to request a demo of our Voice 360 platform. Or if you're interested in learning more about Acton's marketing automation software, you can visit their website or give them a call at 877-530-1555.